historians now would say that the Catholic Church was both a help and a hindrance to astronomy. Through much of the Middle Ages, the Church encouraged astronomy. It was as interested in the calendar as anybody else. And astronomy was one of the subjects that was compulsory at the medieval universities, which began to be founded in the 11th century. And if you wanted to go on and do a theology degree, for instance, at a university like Oxford or Paris, you first had to be an undergraduate, and you had to master the basics of astronomy as they'd been inherited from the Greeks. And if you were an advanced student, you had to read and understand Ptolemy, although not many people manage that because it's difficult stuff. And some of what we hear about the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages is sort of a 19th century myth. For instance, in Europe, we inherited the Greek model of the universe. So during the Middle Ages, no educated person thought that the Earth was flat. They had received they had the works of Aristotle. They knew the evidence for the Earth being a sphere, and that was completely accepted. And actually, in the 16th century, Pope Gregory XIII put together a fairly crack team of astronomers in order to help reform the calendar, because they'd been using the same calendar since the Roman era, and it had got out of kilter with the movements of the sun by a full 10 days. So, and the Chinese just never could have stood for that. They had to keep changing their calendar. If it was even out by one day, that could be a disaster for them. Anyway, Christians didn't seem to be so bothered, but 10 days was hard to ignore. So he used the best astronomers that he had, including, in fact, the work of Copernicus, in order to reform the calendar, and they ended up losing 10 days in 1582, in October 1582. And he also instituted the calendar that we use today, where we don't just have leap years, we have exceptions to leap years. I think one of the most recent from memory was the year 2000, which was not, may have been a leap year, but shouldn't have been a leap year, but for the Gregorian calendar. But it gets complicated. So it wasn't really until the 17th century that we start to see the Catholic Church beginning to make mistakes when it came to astronomy. And obviously the biggest mistake it made was in 1616, when it banned heliocentrism, the idea that the Earth goes around the sun, which Copernicus had taught in his book, The Revolution of the Heavenly Spheres, which came out in 1543.